The lights dimmed, the stage fell silent, and a trembling boy clutched the microphone. No one expected greatness from him, until his first note soared through the air. Judges froze, hearts shattered, and the audience dad leaned in. Within seconds, his voice carried a power that could change lives forever. The auditorium was alive with restless chatter, flashing cameras, and the anticipation of another televised talent show. Families clutched banners, friends cheered loudly, and the judges whispered among themselves, bracing for another night of hopeful performances. But in the wings stood a boy who seemed almost invisible. His clothes were plain, his shoes worn, and his hands shook as he held a microphone far too big for his small frame. He wasn't dressed like a star, nor did he carry the confidence of one. To many watching, he looked like someone who didn't belong on such a grand stage. Yet behind his nervous eyes was a story that no one in the crowd could see. For years, he had lived in silence, his dreams drowned by hardship. His father had worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table, while his mother often skipped meals so her children could eat. Music was the boy's only escape, a secret friend that comforted him in the quiet of night. While other kids played with toys, he sang softly to himself, learning to pour his emotions into every note. That night, as he walked into the blinding light of the stage, doubt weighed heavily on his shoulders. The audience whispered, some even chuckled, assuming this boy would be another forgettable act. The judges looked down at their papers, barely glancing up. He lowered the microphone to his lips, his voice trembling with fear. But then he remembered his mother's words before he left home, "Sing with your heart, and the world will listen." With that, he closed his eyes and let the first note escape. The first note floated into the air, fragile yet piercing, like the cry of a soul that had been waiting too long to be heard. For a second, the audience didn't know how to react. It wasn't loud or flashy, it was raw, trembling, and heartbreakingly real. His voice carried a vulnerability that made the entire room lean forward, their chatter silenced in an instant. As he sang, the tremor in his voice began to fade, replaced by a quiet strength that seemed to grow with every word. It wasn't just a song, it was a confession, a window into the battles he had fought alone in the dark. Each note carried the weight of nights when he had gone hungry, the loneliness of dreams mocked by circumstance, and the fragile hope that one day, he would be enough. One judge, who had sat back unimpressed at first, straightened in her seat. Her pen, once tapping impatiently, fell still. Her eyes softened, drawn not just by the boy's tone but by the undeniable truth in his delivery. Another judge, known for his cold critiques, tilted his head, his expression changing from skepticism to awe. He whispered almost unconsciously, This is different." The boy's eyes remained closed as he sang, as if the stage had vanished and he was back in his small bedroom, singing to the peeling walls and the night sky. The lights above him shimmered, casting a glow that made him appear otherworldly, as though the universe itself had chosen this moment to spotlight his heart. By the time he reached the chorus, his voice had transformed into something powerful, no longer trembling but soaring, carrying every ounce of love his mother had given him, every ounce of sacrifice his father had endured, every ounce of pain he had hidden. The lyrics wrapped around the audience like a blanket, pulling them into his story. A woman in the front row lifted her hands to her mouth, trying to hide her tears. A man who had come to the show just for entertainment now found himself wiping his eyes, realizing he was witnessing something beyond talent, he was witnessing truth. The cameras zoomed in on the judges, capturing emotions rarely seen on live television. One judge blinked rapidly, fighting back tears but failing as a single drop traced down her cheek. Another judge leaned forward, elbows on the table, his usually stern face softened into something vulnerable, something deeply human. They weren't just listening to a contestant, they were being reminded of their own struggles, their own forgotten dreams, their own humanity. The boy's voice climbed higher, raw and unpolished yet more beautiful than perfection. It cracked slightly, but instead of breaking the moment, it deepened it, reminding everyone that real beauty often lies in imperfection. The crack in his voice was like a scar, a testament to everything he had endured and overcome. And then came the high note. He held it with everything inside him, his lungs burning, his heart pounding, his soul pouring out through a single sound that seemed to shatter the invisible walls in the room. The note lingered, echoing against the walls of the auditorium, reaching into the deepest corners of every heart present. The audience erupted, not with cheers, not yet, but with silence. A sacred kind of silence, where no one dared move, no one dared breathe, afraid they might break the fragile magic unfolding before them. Tears streamed freely now, both from the audience and the judges. One judge covered her face, unable to contain her sobs. Another simply shook his head in disbelief, overwhelmed by the raw emotion flooding the room. For the boy, none of it mattered. He wasn't singing for fame, for applause, or even for the judges. He was singing for the people who had carried him here, his father working in the factory, his mother praying at the kitchen table, his younger siblings who believed in him. He was singing for every child who had ever been told they weren't good enough. He was singing for hope. And with each word, each note, he gave the world a piece of his soul. The auditorium, once restless and doubtful, had been transformed. No one saw a nervous boy anymore. They saw a fighter, a dreamer, a voice that spoke for the voiceless. And in that moment, every single person in the room realized, they weren't just watching a performance. They were witnessing a miracle. The last note hung in the air, trembling like a fragile bird, refusing to die out. The boy's chest heaved as he held the microphone close, his eyes still closed, afraid that if he opened them, the moment would shatter. For a heartbeat, the silence in the auditorium was absolute, so complete, so profound, it felt like time itself had stopped to listen. Then, it happened. One judge dropped her pen and covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks as her body shook with sobs she couldn't control. Another judge, the stern one with the reputation for being unbreakable, pressed his hands to his eyes, openly weeping for the first time in his televised career. The cameras caught it all, the broken composure, the raw humanity, the undeniable truth that this boy's voice had reached places no rehearsed performance ever could. The audience erupted in a wave of emotion. Some leapt to their feet, clapping wildly through their tears, while others stood frozen, unable to do anything but cry and smile at the same time. Parents hugged their children tighter. Strangers held hands. In that sacred space, differences of age, race, and background disappeared. Everyone was united by one thing, the power of a voice that carried pure soul. The boy finally opened his eyes, and what he saw left him trembling all over again. An entire stadium on their feet. People chanting his name, crying, clapping, screaming not because he was perfect, but because he was real. His heart pounded in his chest as he whispered to himself, "Mama was right, the world is listening." One of the judges, still wiping her eyes, leaned into her microphone. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "Son, I don't know if you realize what you've just done. You didn't just sing a song, you healed something in us. You reminded us what music is supposed to do. And I promise you, millions around the world will feel this the way we felt it tonight." The boy lowered his head, overwhelmed, tears finally spilling down his own face. He hadn't come to impress anyone, he had simply come to share his heart. But in doing so, he had touched millions. As the ovation continued, the cameras zoomed out to capture the entire scene. A small boy in worn shoes, standing alone under a golden spotlight, bathed in applause that seemed to shake the very walls. He wasn't invisible anymore. He wasn't the nervous kid in the shadows. He was a beacon of hope. And far away, in a modest home with peeling paint and flickering lights, a mother watched her son on a small television screen. She pressed her hands to her lips, tears streaming down her tired face, whispering a prayer of gratitude. She had always told him to sing with his heart, and now the world was singing with him. The performance went viral overnight. Clips of the judges crying uncontrollably spread across social media. People around the globe shared his story, not just for his talent, but for the reminder that greatness can come from the most unexpected places. From classrooms in America to villages in Africa, from city cafes in Europe to quiet homes in Asia, millions watched, millions wept, millions believed again in the power of kindness, resilience, and hope. But for the boy, none of the fame mattered. What mattered was simple. He had given people something they couldn't forget, a piece of his soul wrapped in music. And in the end, that was enough. Message: true greatness doesn't come from perfection, wealth, or fame. It comes from the courage to share your heart, even when the world doubts you. A single voice, honest and pure, can touch millions, and sometimes, even change the world.